Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about any questions that come up around media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little more time on. Today, we're going to talk about networking, not computer networking, but people networking. How do we actually meet people that we can work with? And so we'll be talking about that in the second hour today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about audio and video basics. And this is really when you're working on pipelines. And so how do you make sure that you're getting the maximum? There's kind of we're going to go into these throughout the year in more detail across the board. But what are the things that maximize the quality of your audio chain, maximize the quality of your video chain? We're going to talk through some of those tomorrow. We're talking about show graphics, general show graphics, all of them. We've talked about them specifically, but we're just going to talk about all the little different bits and pieces that we see in a broadcast and what use they have on Wednesday. Thursday, we've got Dan Tepfer, and he's going to be joining us. It's a friend of Todd Reynolds and really incredible artist. And so Todd has brought on Dan, and we're really excited to have him. So stay tuned for that. And of course, we have education on Saturday. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's jump into the questions. We're going to hand it off to Liberty White, our host for Mondays.
Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are watching on YouTube, head over to officehours.global so that you can get on our mailing list and join us in the chat. And you are the producer, so be sure to keep filling up those questions. Also the second hour as well. So let's get this party started. Go ahead, Bill.
Absolutely, Liberty. The first one comes to us today. Our first question from Doug Ferguson in Indianapolis, Indiana. He says, has anyone used ElectionBuddy for their virtual meetings?
John.
So we've got Doug's client is a state soccer association, and they were doing their board meeting. So we went out on the web and we searched for all the voting systems. They had specific requirements for waiting, and so waiting was an issue that would be programmed in. We found two applications. We found this one, ElectionBuddy, and then eBallot were the two that we liked. But proxies and voted waiting were the two features that put ElectionBuddy on top. And it's pretty sophisticated stuff. The problem is getting people off of the Zoom into the election site. But they also have a text version that they can text in. So interesting platform.
Neat. Next question.
Next one comes from Joaquin Behrens in Delft, the Netherlands, and he says, I have a set of proper micro four third lenses with an older body, no clean HDMI out, and I want to look as good as you on camera. Any tips for a proper micro four thirds body as a Zoom setup?
Stefan?
Yeah, the easiest choice, I guess, would be a Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, which has a micro four thirds connection for your lenses.
Alex?
Yeah, I would agree. The 4K is great. There's also, you could probably find used, if you're looking for affordable things, used GH 3s, 4s, 5s, are all the GH Panasonics look pretty nice, and they will take micro four thirds. But if I was going to pick one, I would definitely pick the 4K from Blackmagic.
Courtney?
I think my Canon M50 Mark II is a good choice too. It's under $600, I think $599 without a lens, and it has a very clean HDMI out and pretty fast autofocus. So I think that would be a good choice.
And it's micro four thirds.
I think so.
Oh, for some reason, I thought it was an EF.
You'll have to come back and report to us, Courtney, because I was like, really?
I haven't looked at it since I plugged it in.
Wait, which model is that again?
M50 Mark II.
I'm almost certain that's an EF lens system.
I think it is an EF. No?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I'll have to look. I'll get back to you.
Yep.
I'll write back.
We researched too on the panel as well. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Eric Price in Kansas City. Has anyone found a way to control the Behringer Flow 8 from the M1 Mac using the iOS app?
It looks like.
I don't know if we have anybody that's a Flow 8 user here today, so I'm not sure if we have. It should work, but we haven't. No one knows. I don't know.
Eric,
Yeah, go ahead, Chris. What were you going to say?
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, I was just curious. Can somebody explain?
I jumped in.
Yeah, we'll
back
talk
away
later.
Yeah, exactly.
I was uncalled for, break a protocol, penalty, 15 yards, assume first down. What is the trick to to getting an iOS app onto a Mac? I haven't tried to do it. I presume it, just works. But what is the workflow? Does anybody know? Has anybody done it?
Yeah, it's relatively simple. You if you have an M1 Mac, you go into the App Store and you've got the option Mac OS, iOS. And you just choose the iOS version and that's it.
Yeah, I've been installing tons of stuff that way.
Interesting. I'll have to play with that. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Chris Fenwick, who was just speaking in California in the USA. In order to feel closer to my brother David Brady on the weekends, I'd like to install some green background lights in my truck. Don't judge. Any thoughts on the 12-volt system? There are plenty of USB ports in the truck.
Courtney.
Well, USB ports would be 5 volts, but you can get these LED strips, which are 12 volts, and you can plug them into a cigarette lighter plug in your car, and they have a little remote control that you can use to control the colors there. They're also Wi-Fi, but you probably don't have Wi-Fi in your truck. Maybe you do with your phone, and they can control them over a app in your phone as well as the little infrared remote control. And they're about $20 for 50 feet. You can cut them to length and stick them all over your truck and make it look like a Tijuana taxi.
You literally just cut it down? You just cut it and say,
yeah, you
I
can
only
cut
want
it
this many
every
feet?
every 3 or 4 LEDs. There's a cut point. You just take a pair of scissors and cut them down.
The world we live in.
I was today years old when I found that out. So thank you, Courtney. Alex?
I don't know why you wouldn't just use an inverter and then you can use anything you want. Is there a reason you wouldn't have a 12-volt inverter, just 12 to 120 inverter?
Well, I already have 120 in the
Why are you not
truck. I
using that?
could do that, I guess, I suppose.
And then as far as USB, just remember that like the Pavo tubes that I use are it's not like a line, but those are all USB powered. So they're battery operated, but they take just standard 2.4 amp USB and to power them.
So many choices.
Yeah.
There it is. Jeffrey?
So yeah, I was trying to find the strips. So basically, these are the strips that they're talking about. And every couple feet, you'll see like a little break that looks like 4 different metal tines that you can just basically snip through there, and then you get adapters for that. vMix and a couple others make for the car specifically. So they're actually about maybe 2 feet long. You stick them underneath the dash or where you go. You can screw them in or you can tape them in, however that works. And then Govee has what's called RGBIC, red, green, blue, independent control, which means that they have LED lights that in like a 10 or 15 light splay, you can change each individual one. So if you want to do more than green and have festive colors, you can definitely do that as well.
Bill?
Just wanted to note that unlike inverters, which usually only run while the motor is running, if you're tapping into what used to be called the cigarette lighter port, now it's just the auxiliary port on everything, remember that often stays on even when you shut down your vehicle. So if you have lights running and plugged into that, just be sure that you check that so you don't come out to a oops.
Right. Good call. Next question.
Next question comes from Scott Mueller in Germantown, New York. Dante provides a really great training with their certification classes. Is there something similar for video over IP and networking that the panel has taken?
Guy?
Yeah, I'd take a look at the AWS Skill Builder courses. These are free, and you can find them at explore.skillbuilder.aws, and some of them are pretty deep. So if you want to learn networking, there was one I was just looking at. Anyways, there's those ones, and then there's LinkedIn, and some of these you could actually go to your local library and get a LinkedIn learning course. So instead of paying $300 or whatever it is, you can jump in here and learn. So those are 2 options.
Yeah, that's a good hack. Alex?
Yeah, I think that's one thing Audinate has done really, really well is their training program has really helped people understand how to use their product. I think that the only other company or the 2 other companies I think that do it really well as far as actually teaching you how to use it is Blackmagic and Apple. I mean, Apple has a ton of resources and Blackmagic does too, but I think that more companies need to think about how they support their users that way.
All right, next question.
Next one comes to us from Mitchell Hill here in the panel from Wilmington, Delaware. He says, could we discuss a branding standard for Office Hours 2.0 when showing a still of a panel member to the public?
Mitchell.
Yeah, I guess what I'm leaning on here is that now that we're, sort of semi-celebrities on Office Hours, that if we want to
micro
show
celebrities,
friends,
we're micro celebrities, we're not even
Nano
internet famous yet.
celebrities.
Micro mini.
Exactly.
meta celebrities, whatever
It
we
means
are.
you're a celebrity to each other.
Legends in our own
Anyhow,
minds.
what I was getting at
We're here.
was I like to be able to show my friends, like, here's what I'm doing in the mornings, and here's a link to it. So maybe it would make sense to be using the lower third in Office Hours or some standard way to show that we have some kind of connection.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that in the general process, because one of the requests that I just always feel like is going to show up eventually, because I had made that a while ago, was to have one of the big advantages of the way we're running the system is you should be able to put lower thirds in the super sources. Those should all be able. We should be able to do that without dynamically. And for some reason, I just assumed they would get to it. But I think that every box should be super sourced, into that. That's also the advantage of not animating. We've kind of stopped animating the super sources. And one of the advantages of that is it makes it much easier for us to build a graphic that we put up over top of it, because you start running out of downstream keys. so by doing this, you could generate a downstream key and just fit it over top of the other stuff. It makes the lower thirds will, because we do super sources so often, the lower thirds are a little cumbersome. We could definitely do it in full screen easily, but the super sources become a little bit more complicated. It's why a lot of people don't use super sources don't use lower thirds in super sources, because it's hard. It's hard to register it all. So we'd have to work on that a little bit with the team, but I think we should do it. And I think that, I think that it's, lower thirds are something that I guess I felt like we were just dealing with a lot of other things so far, and we just haven't gotten to them yet. But we have the ability to do it probably more effectively than most, because we know who everybody is, as we know who's in every frame. That's how it builds that. So we should be able to put lower thirds into every frame without too much work, a lot less work than we do when we normally have to do it. So, yeah.
I think it's important context, for anybody to see.
It's been intended to be in there the whole time. So I don't know I'm not sure exactly where it is in the pipeline right now. I mean, there's a lot, the guys have put out a lot of the men and women working on it have put out a lot of fires in the last couple of weeks. And so I've been hesitant to put too much pressure on them, but we definitely need lower thirds before we go live.
Chris?
So Alex, what is the strategy / design for, I'm assuming what I've been seeing is all the text is justified left, and then you'll just take that image and move it over and crop it when it's in a super source. The same image, the same text that's cropped or aligned left in a single frame would be moved and put in the center. Is that the theory?
You mean for the lower third?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we could develop anything we want to have it look that way. But the idea is that we would fill the bottom part of this little frame,
Sure.
With our name, with a name and title. And, it doesn't have to look exactly the same as the other one. It can be anything we make it, to just have name and title underneath
So
it.
kind of doing the Great Gibson theory. What he does, it blows me away. He draws out of a spreadsheet, I believe. He builds one form of lower third for a single, but when it's in a super source, he truncates the data that was in the single and makes it different. It's super sexy.
Because I will say that, yes, because we have the panelists here and they're not random people coming in, we probably would engage with panelists to make their title short enough that it would fit easily into both, rather than have it be long, because long is absurd.
I think what he does is he'll take like name, title, company, and then in a super source, I think it's just like name and company.
Mm-hmm.
He puts the title in on the single. It's super.
the cool thing is that because we have everybody's inside of Mukana, we can put all that stuff in, so we can gather that from the folks that are there. So we don't even need an Excel file. As long as you're up to date in your profile in Mukana, it can deliver that data, and it can deliver it in multiple ways to one or the other. Yeah, so we can just say, just get rid of this line. It doesn't have to be, put over top of it. So it's a pretty flexible system that we have to get working. So I've just assumed that it's on the list that we haven't gotten to yet. So.
Next question.
Next question comes from Todd Perry in Prescott, Arizona, I believe, and says, sending someone a remote kit outside of the hardware and not using Wi-Fi, what Zoom settings are you walking them through to change?
Jeffrey.
None. Most of the time, if I need to do any type of changes, I will have some sort of program on the machine, like a team viewer or something like that I can get into and access, because you have the main interface that gives you some very primary settings. But if you really need to get behind the scenes, you're going to need to give away passwords, and that's just not the thing. And plus, I don't want them to have to deal with that, and I want to play the elephant game just to get all those settings fixed.
Alex?
Yeah, most of the kits that we send out now have a computer with them, usually a Mac Mini. So we just take it over once they connect to the internet. And so, like Jeffrey, we don't want them to have to deal with that. But when we do, if someone just got their own thing, the one thing that we do is we tend to have them turn on original audio, and so they have to go in and fix that. We don't always use original audio, but we want to have access to it. Then we have them do it with and without. Sometimes the original audio is better. Sometimes it's not. So when it's not, we leave original audio off. But I think that's the only major setting that we change inside of Zoom.
Jeffrey?
And one more thing, if you absolutely need to have them change things, send a document, a PDF, or maybe print out something that goes in the case that shows them how to do that. That way you're not trying to explain what they're supposed to be seeing.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Jens in Sound Point, Idaho. And Jen says, can you run multiple instances of Playout Bee on a Mac Mini M1 to act as two HyperDecks?
Mitchell.
I think I asked Jonas this question not too long ago, and he said no, but maybe it was something coming down the road. What I would recommend, though, is going with like a Raspberry Pi and make it a dedicated Playout device using Playout Bee. That'd be the way to go.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Liberty White in Atlanta, Georgia. How do you participate in multiple and active Discord servers? I don't want to miss anything, but these notifications can be a bit much.
Jason?
I think your best bet is to do this through the web. And the reason that I say that is because you can mute the tab anytime that you want. More importantly, if you go into notifications, you can choose when it will ding you. And I found that tends to be useful.
Alex?
I leave all my notifications off. I just check it manually. Like, I just look at something. Things are highlighted when they've been changed, and I go into them. I'm on so many Discord servers, it would be a disaster. So I use them more as a browsing tool. And then the only one that I really see all the time are directs. And then I have a handful of them. If you're putting in second hour suggestions or RFIs or Mukana, I'll generally see those. And then it's when I have time, I'm kind of browsing through the other ones to see how they're doing. But I don't like things dinging in general. So I have literally on my computer, all my notifications open up at 9:59 and close at 10 o'clock Pacific or PM. I don't like my computer. I wish I could turn off notifications on everything. It's evil.
Is there a way to disable the sound? Like, I'm okay with the notifications going up. It's just like, and I have it on Discord on all machines. So it's like ding, 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 ding. I was like, oh, no, does any? I know that might be another.
I just turned them all off.
Okay. All right, Jeffrey.
There is a way. I just can't remember, because down on the bottom you have the microphone mute and the undeafen options, and even if you check those, you still get the dings. But I know there's a way, because I've turned off those audible notifications on there. For me, what I do is anything that's non-essential gets put into a folder, just like the iPhone, you can take the Discords and put them into one group and then collapse that group. The only thing that really bugs the heck out of me is when anybody goes everybody, and then that just gets everybody's boxes with the little numbers on it. I hate it when they get the little numbers. I wish that would go away.
This back end stuff, Alex.
To state it more articulately than I just did, I really believe that notifications are something that creates stress, and makes it very difficult for people to have a contiguous thought. And I think that I have a very strong belief that they are not making us more efficient. They're making us less efficient because they're constantly putting little commas in our life all the time. Just comma. And what happens is when a notification comes up, it's not just that it's a sound, it's a thought. Like it pops up. Now you're going to think about that for a minute. You might think about it for a long time. You might stop working on whatever you're working on. And then you have to remember the ramp up time of where was I and how was I going to do this and that's why I turn everything off. If I need to, when I'm ready to do that, I'll go do that. The best advice I ever got when I was 10 years old was the phone was ringing in my aunt's house. And I said, aren't you going to go get that? And she goes, the phone is for me. No, I'm not for the phone. And she goes, and this is back when we didn't have messages. That phone call was just going to call into the thing. And she goes, when I'm ready to answer the phone, I'll be inside and I'll pick up the phone. I'm not going to run in to pick up the phone. And I've thought about that ever since then, with the phones, with everything else. And you just want those communication things to serve you, not you serve them. And I think that it's just really, really important to think hard when you think about all the things that are interrupting you in your life, because they really are slowing us down, making us feel more stressed and not making us more productive.
Courtney.
So Alex, you're saying the best way to get a hold of you is send you a letter via snail mail.
No, actually, no. That might be the absolute worst way to get a hold of me, because I actually don't read my mail. My wife gets the mail if it's something that's really a big deal, like that I'll do it. I haven't read physical mail in any detail since I was like 19. So,
next question.
Next one comes to us from Gualberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia, and he says best tech specs on a Playout Bee, I assume, computer for Zoom.
Courtney.
Well, I wasn't sure whether this is Playout Bee, if you're talking about Playout Bee, or of course the B-Link by Courtney.
I think it's the B-Link.
Okay, well, if it's Playout Bee, anything that can run Chrome, because it uses the browser interface on a PC to run Playout Bee. And for B-Link, there's a lot. If you're not concerned about 1080p, and most Zoom sessions are in 720p, so any of the B-Links should work fine. But if you do want to participate in a 1080p Zoom conference, you're going to have something that is better than a Celeron. So it has to have more than 4 threads for the prejudice of Zoom to allow it into a meeting. So there are several here that are i5s should work fine. Some of they've got some that the Ryzen 5s as well. Should work fine, that have anything that has 8 threads. So stay away from the Celerons, which are 4 cores and 4 threads. But the Intel i5s or the i3s can, if they have 4 cores and can do 8 threads, should work fine for you.
Jeffrey?
So yeah, on the i5 or i7 on the Intel, I don't think that B-Link makes an Core i9 option, but on the AMD side, you have the Ryzen. You have Ryzen 5, you have Ryzen 7, and they do have a Ryzen 9 for the best machine out there. That'll give you the most available cores. Try to get it with external graphics or what's called discrete graphics in there. That way you have a little bit of room, and try and get as much RAM as possible into that little box, and of course hard drive space. Make sure that you're not filling up your hard drive on there.
And Guy.
Yeah, I bought one of the high-end B-Links with AMD with the Ryzen, and I ran a Cinebench test on every computer that I have here, and it came in dead last. I mean, it was horrible how low it was. So it's an underpowered machine, and that was even the $600 one. So if you want to look at the Skull, what do they call them? The NUCs that have let me see the name of them, Intel Skull Canyon. These ones are like more like in the $900 range, but it just depends on what you want to do with it. If you want something with that kind of small form factor all in one, just be aware of what you want it to do and its capabilities.
And Courtney.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not going to be playing games on it, if you're just going to be using it for Zoom, the others will work fine. I have one here running. That's 4125 Celeron, and it's playing back 9 high-def videos simultaneously. So it does have the power. It's just if it's in benchmarks that are designed for gamers, no, it's not going to come out on top because it's not designed for that kind of thing. It doesn't have the heat transfer. The small package PCs don't have the ability to remove enough heat to run them super speed.
Next question.
Jens is back from Sandpoint, Idaho, and says, can Playout Bee send a separate video and alpha channel for a stinger on an ATEM Extreme like the Hyperdeck?
Mitchell.
Well, last time I asked Jonas that same question, he said no, not yet. So it might be on its way. And since we're on the subject, the ATEM Extreme Hyperdeck, or the Hyperdeck that runs on the ATEM Extreme, I'm still having problems with keeping the alpha channel in sync with the main graphic that's on there. So be careful.
Okay, Alex.
And you're having that problem with HDMI?
Yeah, HDMI 1080 with an adapter, SDI adapter.
Yeah. But the adapter is, how is it getting, are you using 2 different adapters to get them in? Yeah, the chances of that working are very low, and that has to do with gen locking. So it's not going to, those frames are not getting to them. HDMI is a consumer delivery system, and those frames are not going to come perfectly aligned. So it's very difficult. I mean, even in SDI, generally, if you're going to produce something out of the same device, but you're going through different devices with different setups. So usually when you're doing a key fill out of a hardware device, it's locked because it's coming out of the same device and it's going into the same device. When you're getting it from 2 different devices, it's going to be re-syncing that. The chances of that working are almost 0. HDMI with key fill is really, really not it very rarely works perfectly. So you have to kind of you can get away with it if it's a still or if it's a subtle animation without fine detail. So you can have things that are animated. Where you notice it, of course, is where the alpha channel is. So you can have things that are animated without a lot of animation in the alpha channel, and then that will actually work. You can get the fine detail that you're looking for, but you want the alpha channel to remain the same, but things in front of it, can be animated. Anyway, so that's something to think about there. The other thing to remember is that you can go a long way with LumaKey. So that's the thing that if you push your blacks in your graphic up to about 10%, or maybe 15% to be safe, no one's going to notice, as you do the show, and you take that pure black and you key it. Now that may not be a fix for everything. So you just basically key over, you have a pure black that is the background, and then you just lift all your blacks up just a little bit. When someone sees that composited, they very rarely are going to notice the difference in that graphic. It's just going to look black to them. This is what we've been doing for the last 25 years, 25 years or 30 years. And it's not a perfect solution, but if you're having trouble with this, it's also why you don't see motion blur in a lot of graphics, because if they had to LumaKey it, motion blur does not key well. So those are some things to think about if you're trying to find an in-between. But I think with an Extreme, I would be very careful about thinking, considering a key fill solution that's animated.
Mitchell?
Yeah, I confirm what you just said, Alex, because when I went to tech support, I told them, I said, this is a timing error here that's not being dealt with. And, of course, I didn't even think to say HDMI and the capabilities. And
it's not only only a timing error that it is not being dealt with. It's a timing error that they can't deal with. Like it's upstream from it. It's coming into the switcher at different times. I guess I could try to sync those up, but when you're using 2 different pieces of hardware, you can do it. You can sometimes pull it off with. There are computers that will do it. So you have one card. So you can have, there is a HDMI output card, I think, that Blackmagic makes. If you use that card and you're able to address both of those HDMI outputs on the same card going out of a desktop computer, they should come in fine. Like that should actually deliver correctly, but you would need it to come out of the same card, without any other connectors into the computer.
Another fix to that is if actually you unplug the alpha channel, then plug it back in on the ATEM, it'll sometimes sync up.
Sometimes. But you can't build a production run. Hope is not a strategy. So.
Right. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis, and he says, when using Zoom's native feature to stream to Facebook, the audio seems to degrade. Any best practices? Is there a certain audio level in Zoom that does best when restreamed to Facebook? And are there any obscure settings somewhere that could be helpful? Guy.
Yeah, I'd say just don't use that that output. If you have to, then that's what you're going to get. But if you want the way that it works the best, I would either use hardware, which is a Wowza Clearcaster, or the vMix API. So when you output straight out of Zoom, you're only going to get 720p. And if you use either the Clearcaster or use the native API of vMix, you'll get 1080, and then you get more control over the audio and things like that. So I know you've spent a lot of money on those UE 100 cameras and in your infrastructure. So that last mile that is important. I would take it over with a proper encoder.
Next question.
Next one comes to us back from Gualberto in Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Any ideas on how to get a live feed from a DJI Mavic drone?
Guy.
I would recommend going with the Crystal Sky, which is the remote control, which has the HDMI output port. Otherwise, there's no real way, but here's the HDMI out on the Crystal Sky. It's going to be pricey, though.
Jason?
If you try to do it with an iPad, it's not going to be smooth. It's going to be, you're going to have on-screen display, and it's not going to be smooth.
Jason?
Guy's absolutely right. It's not going to be smooth, but if you go hardware out, you can always use Lightning to HDMI and then HDMI directly in. That's going to be your very best bet. Don't use screen mirroring. And I didn't realize that the Crystal Sky would work for Mavics. I could be wrong about that.
Next question.
Jim Hankins in Chesterfield, Michigan on the panel often and says, for live productions, what Stream Deck button function or functions do you wish you had but haven't yet found?
Chris?
I wish there was a button I could push that would just magically make people stop being weird and also just make them sound better and look better. Just a make better button. I don't know what you'd exactly wire it to, but that'd be a great button.
Something in the metaverse, of course. Jeffrey?
Good thing that button doesn't exist for me. Wow, I'd be gone in a second.
Yeah, me too.
For me, yeah. So basically for me, I run across multiple computers, and I got a new show that I'm working on, and I'm using more than one computer on there. So with the help of Companion, I could actually set up a button that I'll actually do something on one computer, but the other not, and of course the other. But the problem is that it's not always a reliable function, and you got to watch for that to make sure that it works on both ends there. The big function is you have what's in Companion and what's out of Companion, what's on Stream Deck, and it would be nice to actually have a function button where I can press something that happens on the computer that the Stream Deck is working on, and then go to Companion to actually do the other thing. I think that would help on that, so I could actually keep the Stream Deck and the functions in Stream Deck there, and then of course use Companion when I need to.
Courtney?
Yeah, maybe a button that would give prompts to the person on the other side of a Zoom call to wrap it up, or a private line message prompt to or you have 10 seconds.
That actually would be very useful.
Prompts,
yeah.
Great, wouldn't it?
I like that one. Next question.
Tony Mobley, our friend in Noonan, Georgia, and here on the panel, says, I am working on adding another Zoom meeting license to House of Worship that I'm working with. This will give me full access to, will this give me full access to streaming from Zoom, a Zoom meeting to YouTube?
So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, should they not already have access to stream out from Zoom to YouTube? Isn't that a built-in? Oh, thanks, Tony, for coming up. Tony?
So the dilemma that I've been experiencing is that I am not the owner of the account, and I have been running into issues of trying to broadcast the church services through YouTube, and I can because because I'm part of the brand account, I am an owner, and I can upload pre-recorded videos. But live streaming, it does not give me permission to do. And so I thought that if I were to get a license with the existing House of Worship account, then that would allow me to live stream to YouTube from Zoom meeting.
Jeffrey?
So if you go into YouTube and you see the live stream, you hit the button, you can actually live stream from there, and you get like the RTMP and stuff like that, right, Tony?
Yes, I can get this stream key, and when I put when the host of the meeting gives me co-host ability, it still has not allowed me to stream live.
Okay.
It says I don't have permission.
Then you'd need to have the the login information of the Zoom room to actually do the stream from there.
Alex?
Yeah, there's two things. One is you have to have the credentials to YouTube, which you sound like you already have. So you need to be logged into YouTube on the web browser that is native, the native pass-through. Then, which means that like when you click on any link, it goes to Chrome or it goes to Safari or it goes in whatever browser that is. You need to be logged into YouTube as the account owner of that. The other thing you have to do is you have to be host. So you have to be the host for the meeting. And that's why we have this little handoff at the beginning of our show where I have to be host, and then I'd go start the YouTube event. Then I hand host back to, or I hand host off to somebody to cut the show. So you can't be co-host. You have to be host of the show for the moment that you start the live stream. So you basically, and you don't have to start the moment that you queue up the live stream. So when you hit stream to YouTube, you have to be the host. It will open a web page and ask you to log in and then ask you to put a name in. You can let that sit for a couple minutes. So what I do every morning is I start the event. It brings up a web page that's a YouTube terminal. And then I put in that piece, then I hand it off to whoever, I hand the host off again. I can start that live stream now whenever I want. The linkage has been made. And I can do that. So you do that at the beginning of the show. And as soon as now you can go live seamlessly, and the person who's the host is still the host. But you have to have host for a moment to launch it. I think that might be when you said them making co-host is when I thought, oh, you have to be host, not co-host.
Adding the license, will that solve the problem, Alex?
No, you need to do what I just described. No matter what, you have to be host of the event for a moment. Doesn't matter whose license it is. I mean, I can hand it to Jeffrey right now, or if Sky wanted to go live, Sky or whoever's cutting right now could go live, right? Can go anybody who's host can go live, but it doesn't matter what licenses you have. It matters whether you're host or not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Todd Perry, again from Prescott, Arizona, says, what are the suggested Zoom settings or other suggestions outside of hardware for someone in an organization that has constrained bandwidth? For example, a rural hospital that would prioritize bandwidth to an EMR system or sending medical images.
Alex?
The biggest issue that you have is really that if you start combining things, Zoom has trouble. So when I have low bandwidth on Zoom, the first thing I do is turn off video because it's binding both of those up. Suddenly the audio will get much better. What I would probably do here is I would join, if I was really in low bandwidth, I would be sharing images from a computer at the rural hospital, and I'd be on the phone. I'd call into Zoom and just be audio only and then showing pictures. The pictures then can come up as fast as they can go up. And you're in a separate audio and you're not being affected. One is not affecting the other one as far as connectivity goes.
Jason?
Yeah, +1 on calling in. And if you end up needing to use a computer to do the medical image sharing, I would say there's a way to do this, and I haven't quite nailed it down on a recent version, but you can start a screen share in your own personal meeting room that immediately and automatically turns off video. So it's without video, simply a screen share. That might be another possibility, but I like the idea of calling into Zoom. And in fact, I regularly do that with clients, especially ones that struggle with audio. I will just stay on the phone with them, and then we'll do a screen share.
Jason, you popped up about 7 dB on that answer.
Sorry.
He was super excited to help you out. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jim Hankins in Chesterfield, Michigan. What are your favorite Stream Deck plugins and why?
Chris.
I know that OBS is not highly regarded by a lot of people, but the OBS plugin for Stream Deck is super handy. I use it all the time. It's how I pull up my framer and everything, and it very simply just recalls any the terminology they use is scene, any scene that you've built. So I can build a scene and map it to a button. Super simple, done. It works great.
Mitchell.
I love the add-on using Mix Effects. It's just, as Alex has said before, it just makes everything that ATEM does times 10. I have it in front of me. It controls everything, and even now it has a pretty good control over the Fairlight audio mixing. So Stream Deck and Mix Effects Pro, way to go.
Nigel?
Yeah, I have a setup for my basic Zoom and Teams, and that's my sort of homepage, so I can always hit those. But I use Ecamm a lot, and I can really run my whole Ecamm shows just from my hand on one Stream Deck, and I found that very useful.
Jeffrey.
So, of course, Wirecast and vMix both have plugins that you can use for that. So I've got them both loaded in there. The Zoom buttons, I know some people don't like them, but they are very handy every now and then. And then, of course, the soundboard for my extra shows that use that, so I can just go in and go from there. But the other thing is just making those folders and then creating a totally different set of buttons for everything from there. And I do have one more that's kind of useful, and that is the time zone one. So if I need to, because I need to check what time it is in England and New Zealand and Seoul many times a day. So I just hit that button, and there it is.
Nice. Before we get to the next question, we have some breaking news from Alex.
I decided if I find out about something during the show, I figure like we should talk about it, or at least let people know. Unity, the competitor to Unreal, has bought Ziva Dynamics, a leader in sophisticated simulation and deformation, machine learning, and real-time character generation or creation. Yeah, so that's a pretty big purchase. We'll probably try to talk about it at some point in the future. If you want to ask questions about it, we'll have a discussion this morning. But you want to Ziva, Z-I-V-A Dynamics and so we continue to see this competition keep moving forward, and if we have more information, we'll let you know.
And that's the power of office hours.
Yeah.
When we bring you breaking
just happened.
news.
Like literally just popped out. And I mean, I do have this idea, by the way, and people can let us know if they think it's a good idea of having news at the beginning of the day. Like the first 5 minutes is like this little like a highlight of news items of just things that our community may be interested in, and then people can decide whether they want to talk about them or not. But we can just kind of pop in. But this one happened literally during our shows.
Can we get a cool break-in news banner?
I know. I was thinking that too when I saw
action-related headlines,
and then have like a big sweeper, like
stare and
breaking news,
bumper.
And it's got to have a
right.
You know, like that. Here we go.
And now
here's an after-hours project.
And now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Back to our next question. Next question, please.
Then Tony Mobley's up next again from Noonan, Georgia. What is the recommended software to use with LinkedIn live streaming?
Jeffrey?
Well, with LinkedIn, it's just an RTMP, so you could use almost any piece of software. I use Restream for most of my LinkedIn Live stuff, but you can definitely throw it into an OBS. You can throw it into a Wirecast, an Ecamm, all of them, as long as they support RTMP.
And I'll jump in with, we use StreamYard. It's super easy, and it's already integrated into comments, etc. There is a link on LinkedIn. I'll find it after the show, and I'll shoot that across in the chat, where it does say the platforms, because last I recall, there were some like Ecamm, apart from the RTMP side that Jeffrey just shared, there's some people who still do not have access yet. So I'll shoot that across in the chat. Next question.
Next one comes from Mark Giuliani in Washington, D.C. He says, does anyone know an app that allows you to watch a video on an iPad to make notes right on the video, allowing you to circle areas of the screen and offer critiques?
Chris.
I think our friends at Adobe last year bought a little company out of New York called Frame.io, and it will do exactly that. No?
Alex?
Kind
If it's
of.
uploaded, I mean,
Yeah, if it's uploaded to it. The hard part is that it's so Frame.io is I mean, I use it all day. I'm in Frame.io. It's a great product. I use it mostly. I use it as a replacement for Dropbox that you can actually add comments to and draw on things. What I will say is that there is an app that wants to be made in this area. I've thought about it a lot because Frame.io is a little clunky when it comes to like doing it on an iPad as compared to being able to open that video natively and be able to comment on it and send it back. I mean, there is an advantage to having it on the web, but it's also the web interface for that is a little clunky in my opinion. And so it doesn't feel.
So you're proposing
fluid.
an app that's a standalone app that's not tied to the web. What do you think would be the mechanism that would allow? I get that, but you're going to have to. What in the world are you trying?
Nothing. Anyway, go ahead.
I have nothing else to say.
Is that the race course at Le Mans?
Bill?
I was just going to note that Apple has a markup thing for PDFs and things like that that's kind of built
not for
into
video.
the Mac OS, and that was my point. All they'd have to do is make a video background available for that, and they'd already have it basically.
No, the reason I thought about it a lot is because the teardowns. If you go to the Pixel Core YouTube page, the videos that I always promise that I'll start again, but I never have time. That was using this thing here. So basically, I just play it into my system and circle things and talk about them. And I always was like, oh, what I should be doing is doing this on an iPad. This would be so much better on an iPad. And I constantly looked for them and can't find that app. And so it's been one of those things that I may. I do have somebody that has. Yeah. Anyway, so it'll be version 2 of what I'm doing now.
But it's interesting because what you're doing with your breakdown videos, and I apologize, Liberty, I jumped in, is you're playing it out, you're running it through a switcher, you're making a copy of it.
Yep.
And presumably you want to lay some sort of overlay on top of a QuickTime file that is timecode based, that is the same duration as.
I mean, really, all you need to do is play the video
hard.
and hear your mic. No, it just needs to play your video and hear your mic and record it. It doesn't have to put the overlay. I mean, it has to have an overlay when you're working on it, but it just saves it as a movie.
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're overlooking the fact that somebody's going to stop it,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're going to rewind it.
Mhm.
And now am I going to watch all of their fumbling and stumbling as they're
Mhm.
shuttling around trying finding the part that.
And directors and producers would use that every day.
Yeah,
Every
and
day.
editors would hate it. They
Yeah,
would
but-
just like to watch you scan around.
Mhm.
I would change careers eventually.
What you do is you get an editing assistant to put it all into Frame.io.
Okay, you win.
The reason I say that is that when you have, someone who has very limited time, you have to stop thinking about them conforming to the system, and the system has to conform to them. And maybe that's an extra person to do translation. But one of the things we get caught up in is you have creative minds that are thinking really a mile a minute. And what people do is they try to fit them they try to force that into some kind of little package of you have to use this app, and they just well, I just won't give you any input because I don't have time to do that, or I'm not interested in doing that, or that doesn't fit for me. And so, a lot of productions we work with, you figure out the way the director or the producer or the art director wants to work, and then you just conform. Like you just figure it out. I mean, the way that it worked in, for episode 1 was George would walk into the art department. The entire art department stops. George walks around, talks about things, talks about what he thinks is important, talks about why he doesn't like, no, this isn't going to work. This is why. And a whole bunch of people would take notes, and then he'd leave. Like that was, and because he didn't have time to, he didn't have time to like go through all of that, and so that interface is like super important, and we just don't. I think people want people to learn how to use the Frame.io interface. I believe is great for technicians, and it's really good for talent as far as people putting in. But I get all kinds of feedback from my civilian clients who don't do this and looking at it, they don't understand the keyframes. They have trouble with it's really built around the tech artist because
Totally agree.
and this always comes from, I mean, and it works to some degree in the sense that if you just stop and put a comment in, if you just hit stop and put a comment in, it's super easy to use. And I gave it to my parents. I was working on a video for my parents and I uploaded the frame. They were able to download it, not download it, but open it and put their comments in. I just said, just hit stop and type what you want and then hit play and then hit stop and type what you want. But if anybody wants to do any more than that, you're either a technician who really understands it or you're confused and frustrated. Like that's a huge piece that Frame.io has to sort out.
Next question.
Next one comes again from Jens in Sandpoint, Idaho. And he says, does anyone else use vertical displays in their setups?
Jason?
When I'm doing a lot of spreadsheet stuff, I will take my displays. They're all on Ergotron arms, and I will turn one or two of them sideways, and it's very handy.
Chris?
Chris, you're muted.
Oh, Chris, yeah, you're muted.
I apologize. So over here, I use a vertical display. I bought it initially for scripts when I'm editing, and it works great for that. What it has become, however, is a place for Discord, OBS, and my ATEM software stacked on top of each other. And it does that probably 95% of the time now.
Okay, next question.
Tony Mobley's up next from Noonan, Georgia, and he says, Liberty White is doing a great job of hosting Monday's office hours. What is she doing to feel so comfortable to do this great work?
Thank you so much for that, Tony. I would say the community, definitely the cheering on before the show, the after the show, the constructive feedback that I get from Alex and from others. And then I do host, so it's kind of natural from that perspective, but it was the tech side. So now that I'm a few weeks, months into it, just it all coming together. So I would say to anyone, it's like doing something new, right? You've got to figure out the technical side of things and then find your rhythm and find your flow. Like this Liberty you see here, 2 months from now, be a totally different host. Alex?
And I will say the trajectory has been amazing. I mean, every single week it's significantly better than the last week. So it's really fun to watch. So.
Thanks. And just even a quick example of feedback, like after last week's show, Alex gave feedback just on my presence and whatnot. And he's like, do that, because whatever I was doing in after hours, he said, do that. So having people around you that can give constructive feedback, but then you also using it and not internalizing, but taking it and see how you can add your mojo to it, it definitely helps in the end. Alex?
And I just wanted to point out that the only feedback I gave Liberty was just to be more herself. Like, there was there was nothing to be other than like what she was being was something different during the show. And then we, then after, when we get into after hours, I was like, just do the thing that you're doing, which is just being who you are. That's why we asked Liberty to host. And so anyway, you're fantastic to watch.
Thank you. Next question.
Clive Kitchener out of Souk, British Columbia, Canada says, my mic, a Shure MV51, has a flat setting. What are the advantages, disadvantages of recording spoken word using a flat setting? Alex recommended this mic years ago on MacBreak Weekly.
Courtney.
Well, the flat setting, that particular mic has a number of settings. Oops, sorry, this one. That it tailors the equalization and the roll-off for music, or you see this little knob here, for music or voice or flat, or typing. I don't know, messages. I'm not sure, but the flat setting basically means it's not rolling off any of the low end, and a lot of time most microphones will have a low end roll-off that'll roll off below 50 hertz, and this helps you get rid of hum from lights or from bad cables, things like that. It also helps eliminate the proximity effects so that when you get close to the mic, it doesn't overwhelm the low end. That's the low end roll off. So if you're operating in the flat mode, it doesn't roll off the low end, so you will still have all those low end noises that are not part of the vocal range that you may want to filter out. So if you have rumble from handling. If you're hand holding the mic, you want to have that. You don't want to have it in the flat mode. If you're outdoors where you have wind noise, you don't want to have it in the flat mode because it'll eliminate some of the low end roll off will eliminate some of that low frequency sound.
Bill?
I think Courtney mostly covered it. I mean, that little line that most mics, and I don't think the one that she's talking about, or that Clive is talking about has it, but it has a flat line, and then on the left side, as you look at it, if it rolls off, that's the low end roll off. Sometimes the right side will have a little peak, that's high boost or upper frequency boost, and it just gives you a chance to make the mic better in difficult circumstances.
Next question.
Chris Fenwick's up next from California. What are the good or native ISOs on the Blackmagic 6K Pro? Been playing with the ISO on my camera and not sure what the best settings are.
Jason.
I can't speak to the best settings, but I can give you the native. The dual native is at 400 and 3200. It's one of these weird cameras, though. So, like, for example, I'll put a link in Mukana, but at ISO 400, you can capture 7.5 stops below middle gray and 5.9 above. At 100, it's 9.5 below and then 3.9 above. Which is still, to me, a little bit strange. It's a still photography. I suppose it makes sense. But yeah, the native ISO is 400 and 3200.
Chris?
So it will be as clean. And I'll tell you why I did this. I think Nigel still here? I think Nigel's camera looks the best of anybody on office hours. I think his lighting balance is good. The camera looks great. He's not, too much anything. It looks fantastic. So I said to him, I go, what do you have it set at? He has it set at a 400 ISO, 3.7 iris, and then he's using similar lights to what I'm using, positioned better. I was at 4.5 and 2000 with the light levels that I felt comfortable with, and I thought my picture looked noisy. I have now changed my settings to what Nigel has, and then I had to crank up my lights to, I feel like I'm at front row at a Sun concert, which may be what it has to be. But I think it looks cleaner. It doesn't look as noisy. So my question is, if 400 ISO is a native ISO and 3200 ISO is a native ISO, does that mean it will effectively be as clean an image at 400 as it is at 3200?
Never. My answer is never. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. It's just.
So what does native ISO mean then?
Well, that's a good question. That's where I think it's where the image sensor is most calibrated to. Alex, help me out here.
Yeah, it's where so there's 400 and 3200. So basically 3200 is going to be the ISOs that go up higher than that are going to be based on that 3200, and the 400 up to a certain rate, up to 3200, I think it's up to 3200, are going to be based on the 400. So you're just getting more and more gain. So for instance, something just below 3200 will look much grainier than 3200. So you'll reduce grain at 3200. I wouldn't run that. I wouldn't run anything that I cared about over 800. Like, just to put it in perspective, like 800 is the highest that I would run a Blackmagic camera.
Think of it like first gear,
it's just that you
a tachometer, right? And you shift into first, and then you go into second. That's the way I think of native ISO.
Yeah. But I wouldn't. Again, I think that for me, the ISO, everything over 800 is objectionable for most things.
Because I was at 2000 and just looking at the background, it just looks noisy.
It's worse than that. It's worse than noisy. Noise defeats the temporal compression of zoom. So when things are noisy, it's not just that they're noisy. That would be okay actually, but the problem is it actually degrades the entire image because all those. It's the same problem we see with LED walls. Is all those little things changing. It means that it has to build more P frame or more B and P frames technically, but it just can't save as much from one image to the next. So even though you have a still background to zoom, it's not still. So it can actually soften your image because it's just compressing it down more because it has a hard budget for the amount it can do per second, 6.25 gig megs a second or something like that, or 6.5 or something in that range. And when it runs out, it just starts degrading the quality of the image. So the part of what makes Nigel's look so good is because he doesn't have that grain, it's nice and clean, and it actually compresses better, which means there's more detail.
So do you think this, and I don't ask you to memorize my frame every day, but do you think this looks better than you remember it? Because I think it does look cleaner.
Oh, yeah.
I totally get.
I think it looks really good. It's a little green.
Well, I can fix that.
But
I think it looks great. I think it looks much better than it did.
Yeah, it's great. It looks really good.
Okay. So more blue?
There's something, you have an overall green. There's an overall green tint to the background that's coming from somewhere. That's what I'm noticing. Adding blue to it is just, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll get to a couple more questions because we are now at the top of the hour, but we'll keep it going for a few more minutes. Next question.
Stefan Fisch in Würzburg, Germany is up next. And he says, does the HDR broadcast of Office Hours 2.0 have to be the only signal to reach a display to show up the right way? Or what is the correct signal chain?
We're going to add an SDR version of it so that you'll be able to watch SDR or HDR, but you do have to have every piece of the device, every piece of the workflow has to know what HDR is. So for instance, if you're going to watch it on a display, that display has to know that it's there. So an HDR display with YouTube native or an HDR display that is connected to a recent Apple TV will all know what HDR is and should display it correctly because it's just HDR10. So it's not a very complicated format. So if it's native to the TV or the OTT box is available, it should see it. The last 2 years of Apple devices will be able to, laptops will be able to see it. Last 2 years or 3 years of your iOS devices will be able to see it. So it should, in those cases, it should pop.
Stefan?
Yeah, and my question is, has all of the picture to be in HDR? If I have a for example, I don't know, I'm looking on YouTube in my browser, and the content is in HDR, but everything around is not.
Yeah, because
it doesn't work.
Oh, you mean, wow. That I've never watched it on a web page. I just watch it on full screen on my when I watch it. It should be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. But the video will it might apply a curve to the entire page, the entire window, because it can't pick a window. So it may just say, I'm going to make this pop out, and it'll do whatever it does to the rest of the image because it has to make the image look correct. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good question, Stefan. We'll
good, yeah.
We'll come back.
To do some more research.
Right.
Again, this is why we're doing HDR. Is that we're one of the only people that are doing it regularly, and we turned it off for a little while, mostly because I had to save money. So anyway, but we will be turning it on very soon again. But the reason that we were doing it every day, and the reason we're going to go back to doing it every day, is because we're the only ones doing it every day, and we're running into problems that no one else has run into yet. And saying, oh, this is something we have to think about. No, that is something, and that's why it's worthwhile for us to experiment and learn in that area.
Next question.
Samuel Nordvik, coming to us from Norway this morning, says, for those of you that output audio and video from vMix into Zoom, how is your signal chain? Is there a way to input NDI with audio in sync without showing an NDI watermark every time one goes into a meeting or a breakout room?
Guy.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where this watermark would be coming from, because when you choose NDI as a source going in or out of vMix, there's no watermarks there. The only thing I could think of is if you were going into a meeting with Zoom Room and trying to pull the NDI that way, then you would get that alert that says that this meeting is being live streamed over NDI. So if that's not what you're doing, and you're having an issue, I would try to double click the audio, and there's a delay setting, and you can, mine's negative 110 right now to get mine in sync, but I'm using NDI. So my workflow is a bird dog converter that brings in my HDMI video, and my audio is coming in from sound devices. So the sound devices is super fast coming in, so I have to delay it, and then going out, I'm actually using NDI coming into Zoom, but then virtual audio cable so VB audio cable. If you're on a PC, on the Mac, you could use loopback or something like that, but then you can adjust your settings. But there should be no watermarks. If there is one, if you can follow up in Discord, I'm confused as to where a watermark would be, because I've got it running on a PC and a Mac right now, and there's no watermarks.
Yeah, Samuel, it might be good too to come even into after hours so that you can have us actually watching you go through and seeing what that workflow would look like. So there we go. Well, we wrapped up our first hour, and now we're heading into our second hour on people, on networking, not cable wise, but people wise. Alex?
Yeah, and a couple notes. This will probably surprise some people because the Zoom email did go out. We don't know why. And just a couple notes here. We don't know why it didn't go out. But it didn't go out this morning. So that's there. Also, there may be a networking question that came up that was kicked back to somebody. If you suddenly see that your question's not in the queue, it has to do with the fact that it moved as I was kicking other ones back. I was doing first hour ones and it moved and I pushed it. So if we don't get to your question, re-raise it or check your notes. I know I pushed one back that was networking. I don't know what it was. So anyway, because it moved just as I was clicking on it. Anyway, one of the things that I think this is one of the more important parts of business is and I'll say that actually I think it's the most important part is your community. How do you, however you define that, but how you connect with other people is going to make or break your company or your business or your whatever you're doing more than almost anything else, and in my opinion. And so, we can talk a lot about marketing and advertising and, lots of those things, and those can build up, but the community that you build around you is going to be one of the most important things. And so I thought it would be useful for us to have a conversation about how to build that. How do you, find new people to be around, and how do you maintain those relationships and continue to grow those relationships over time? So I thought that would be a useful discussion. I don't know if other folks here want to talk about it, but since no one else has raised their hand in the general discussion, we'll go ahead and I'll hand it back to Liberty.
All right. Here
Chris.
we go. We've got Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to keep track of people. And, back in the old days when we'd go on site and we'd meet people, a lot of times we'd really connect with people, and you really have to make a point to, collect that information. And it's more than just, dude, what's your Instagram? But, you want to be able to contact people. And I tell you, I had an incident the other day where, and I got to say, I completely failed at this. There was one of the camera guys that I had worked with for years in Hawaii, and I can't figure out how to find him. And I needed to talk to him about something that had come out, and it drove me crazy. I couldn't figure out how to find. And it was like one of these things. It's like, oh, it's this once a year job. I'm in the islands, and he would travel to whatever island we were doing shows at, and it was like, and the thing is, like, his name is right on. He's got what I would call an unusual name, and I can't think of his name, and it's driving me nuts. But you have to collect that stuff. And I always write down in my contact, Hawaii camera, and if I write your name down, it means I'd hire you again. If I don't, it means I'm good.
Right. Likewise, if your number's not saved in my phone, that's kind of my equivalent. If it's not saved in my phone, then I can find you when I need you. But yeah, just even just when we're talking about networking is just even the importance of not just when you make that contact, but that follow up. And this is something I had a mentor a couple years ago, just really harping on, yes, all this technical stuff and all the work and being innovative, that's great. But if you're not checking in on people or following up, because, from a marketing perspective, yes, they call it top of mind awareness. That's why you keep putting out ads. That's why you keep putting out content. But the same goes with your clients. And I remember remember a PR friend shared with me that sometimes at their agency, it's like if somebody sends an email and there's a project that they need help with, it's like, oh, wait, that person does do XYZ. And that person could possibly get the opportunity to find out about the project before maybe other people that are on their roster. So just those like small things. I mean, it's just good human nature to follow up and check in on people. But just going back to just overall, it's all a part of the idea of networking, not just that cold event that you go to, but even the people that are already in your Rolodex. Alex?
The hardest part, I think, for people is to do this in a way that feels authentic. Like it's, sending me form letters that have my name on it that say, "Have you thought about this?" and blah, blah, blah. I hate those emails. In fact, that's probably going to be the thing that has me not, ping people again is if I feel like I'm on some list that's going to tell me that, that I didn't put myself on. It's just someone that I've worked with and now they have this, they send these things out and it drives me a little nutty. But what I will say is that I have a lot of people that I just like. And I send them things that I think is cool, like, oh, this person would really think this is cool, and I just send it to them. And I don't have any, like, it doesn't happen. I don't have any regular, cadence. I don't have I should market this, or I have to get the word out, or anything else. It's just like, this is cool. I'll send it to someone that I think would enjoy that. I've gotten a lot of work that way. It's kind of, because what happens is that and I don't do it to get work. I do it because I'm just interested in it, and these are other folks. And I think I have to admit that my networking is very organic, and probably too organic, in the sense that I don't have any rules. I mostly just hang out with people that I enjoy, I will say that for the people that you enjoy being around, do think about them and do, be in contact with them, in that area. Marketing or networking is, marketing sometimes, branding and networking are similar in the sense that they are closer to farming than hunting and gathering. When you're out trying to do sales and you're going to now pick up the phone and start calling people to try to get work, that's hunting and gathering. Networking and branding is farming. You're watering something that isn't going to come out of the ground for a long time. And it's going to take a long, and you're building that relationship, but you want to think about it like a garden, and it's really something that you're going to spend, but it's, you're thinking about and sometimes you're building stuff that you may not even use, but the thing is that that constant seeding, watering, fertilizing process, that it's there when you need it. That's been my approach for a long time, since I was on the farm. So.
Nigel?
Yeah, I'm going to save my best tip for the next question, which Sky asked. But when I mentor people, I always tell them that there are 3 basic skills you need to have in any sort of modern career nowadays. I call them content, approach, and network. It's what you know, how you use what you know, and who knows that you can use what you know. And so you can have all the content in the world and you can be the best person at what you do. But if you can't work with others, then that always going to limit you, unless what your role in life to be is the one expert in that subject. But to build a career and build more than just sitting alone on yourself, then other people have got to know that you can use what you know, both inside your organization and outside. So I always tell people, think about content, approach, network, and you're going to build your career that way.
As they say, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Just side note there. Sky.
Stealing all the great quotes, aren't you, Liberty? And by the way, Liberty,
I felt
yes,
a Sky moment there. I was like,
I think it's so celebrate that. And yes, you are in my Rolodex and or phone or whatever the means that I connect with people nowadays. And I still remember this amazing human that has since gone on to the next life, but he worked as the scheduling person at the local production facility. And he said, Sky, I like you. I just don't need you until I need you. And it's like, okay. And that's when I started listening into the difference between the social connections in networking and the business connections in networking, and not to devalue myself in not getting the job because maybe I wasn't the right person. And then I got to be hired as a director, and I realized I was casting, and the person I was looking for needed to fit a certain role. And so I was making choices and decisions to cast that person in that role that felt moving that story forward or sold that product in that sense. So my networking originally did a lot with NAB. And then I realized I got just weighted down with all that heavy piece of paper. And then the internet came along and said, I don't need to take home those things. I can get it on a PDF or on the web. So we are constantly, I love Alex's comment of taking things back to the agrarian society. And again, what does survival look like as humans from day one? And that's kind of my origin of how do we stay connected and survive? And this people networking is just the current buzzwords, but we're going to be talking a lot about this. This is going to be fun.
Yes. Courtney.
Well, my idea, I kind of abhor Facebook, so I'm not on there and social media in general, but old school, I'm kind of old school, and a good way to socially network is through professional organizations like SMPTE, or if you're local, if you're a member of a union, go to your union meetings. It's a good place to meet other people who do the same thing you do and talk to them and develop a relationship with them. And who knows, they may give you a call when they're booked up on something and can't do the job. Hey, I met that guy at a union meeting, and he seemed like he knew what he was talking about, so maybe I'll give him a call or her a call. And so a social organization or even an online website like a JW Sound Group is a good group of sound mixers that exchange ideas on a website, as well as forums for individual products and that you use, and so you'll find other people that are like-minded in that area of the forums, and you can provide advice and you can get advice from them, and in the process meet somebody. But make sure it's a forum who insists on using your real name. If they use handles or made up names, then it doesn't really do you any good for networking.
That's a really good point. I remember when I would, back in the day, go into a city, I'd pick up like the community newspaper to just see. Now you can do that online, but see what groups, you go to the back page and see what community members, because that's just a great way to get the lay of the land, when you go someplace new. Bill?
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts. One of them is that I remember in my early days, back when I was just starting out, it suddenly struck me that I could let clients find me and I could go out and talk to everybody that I possibly could and just see what showed up. But I had the sneaking suspicion that client, that potential person who first heard about me, might not be completely simpatical with the kind of work that I wanted to do. And I realized, well, then why shouldn't I go out and do my best to try to drive the kind of people who are interested in what I can do? So I stopped generically asking people, do you know anybody? And I started thinking about what kind of work would I like to do for the rest of my career. And over the course of the years that I was starting to build up, there were a couple of clients that came by that I thought, I really don't want to do this. They have a good product and they're legit operations, but I don't want to spend my life. One of them was a huge meatpacking firm, and I just don't want to hang around and watch video of cows being killed all day long. It just doesn't resonate with me. And so on the other hand, I saw a little ad in the local paper one day that they were looking for a new personnel director at PetSmart. And I thought, well, now I enjoy pets. That would be fun. So I got a stupid little stuffed dog and I sent it with my resume over there because I knew there was going to be a new marketing director. That eventually spun itself into about 10 years of work, because I had done two things. Number one, I had targeted who I wanted to spend my time with, and I had tried to do some little, even if it was a silly thing, to stand out from all the resumes that were hitting the desk. The other thing, I think, there's a term in radio that we used to live and die by, and it's reach and frequency. If you're trying to establish these relationships, reach is going out to where the people are that you think might be interested in hiring you. So if you're interested in, let's say baseball is your passion, not just hanging around games, but maybe hanging around where the crew is setting up and things like that. And this is very delicate because you have to make sure that you stay completely appropriate and you can't be pushing because you'll develop a bad reputation. But the frequency of it is the more time your face is seen by somebody who has the potential to hire you, the more comfortable they become around you, particularly if you're really scrupulous about laying back and not being an annoying. You can't go bother people at all. But if you're in the place if you're around the industry that you want to work in and you're circumspect about your behavior and you just show interest and maybe have a couple of conversations, and eventually those are the kind of beginning relationships that can turn into work in the long run.
Tony.
As Alice was sharing with Liberty about being herself, I think that the most important thing is being who you are, and that who you are is what people get to see, because no one has to do anything for anybody else. But if you are authentic and you are doing the things that you think are important, and you are pushing those things, people see that you are trying your best to accomplish a particular task or job, and they will help you. But the thing that you have to be mindful always is to be thankful for the help and support that you get, and never forget or take it for granted.
Wise words, wise words. John.
You know, I hang out with my peers. They're in late 50s, 60s, and they're all about meeting in person. And I tell them the people that I've met on virtual over the past decade, which the first big community was Hello World. That was about 15 years ago. But then Blab, and that's where Tony Mobley and I met. Tony and Leland, there was a bunch of us that met there. And those relations are way more profound than anybody I've met in physical space. So I'm a huge proponent of networking online.
Alex?
The core of almost everything I've done, for the last 30 years has all been based around serving the community that I'm most interested in. So the thing that I'm interested in, I try to figure out how do I serve that community. And then I don't really have a lot of expectations other than good things will come out of it. And so, that started in radio. I, just walked in and started helping. I started writing articles about 3D for free for a little magazine that didn't have any money, and then ended up in larger magazines. And then, I spoke at user groups for free. I was on Tech TV for free, like all of those things. And I'm constantly, and I put a lot of work into all those things, and really, but they have energized everything else that I've done, and so, the Pixel Core wouldn't have started up without me being on Tech TV every week. I mean, I built up a huge mailing list that made that work, and so, and it didn't take more than all I had to do was just simply, when I've learned something, I'm going to put it out there. And that's what we're doing that here. So this is a bigger version of that. But it is, that I find that to get back to like what you're passionate about and finding some way to serve the audience, you get into you start building this community that you'll learn from, and you'll hopefully help and get something out of all the time.
Jason.
I'm the first to admit that I think I've been relatively successful at this, and I genuinely don't think that I'm formulaic about it. I have maybe 900 clients that I've accumulated over the last dozen years, and the best I can guess about the reason that it's managed to work is that I always am genuine. I pour myself completely and totally into whatever it is that I'm after, whatever it is that I'm working on. I'm passionate and I am myself, and people tend to respond to that. I've met a number of people that I didn't know as the result of office hours, and it is just the most recent example. You do what you love, and you love what you do, and your passion will come through, and people will reach out to you because they figure out that you are doing what you love.
Yeah, and with just our world becoming more and more global, like these skills are definitely going to be important. So now we will dive into the questions. Bill?
Absolutely. Next question comes to us from Sky Gleason in Seattle. And Sky says, when connecting with other humans for work, when is it appropriate to have a relational relationship? And when is it appropriate to have a transactional relationship?
Nigel?
Okay, so I think all relationships are relational. So I think whether you think of them as transactional or relational, they're all relational. And the single most important thing I think you can do for your network, for care and feeding of your network, is when someone asks you for something, do what you can to help them get it, even though there's nothing in it for you. So I get every day, I get every other day, do you know someone who could do this? Is there someone in your network? And I always try and spend 15 or 20 minutes trying to get somebody an answer. I don't ask for anything, I just give. And I found that that goodwill that you do with people pays back 2 or 3 times. And so whenever anyone asks you for something, see what you can do. Whatever you do, do not be passive aggressive. Don't say you're going to do it if you're not going to do it, because that's something that can kill your network very fast.
Very quickly. Sky?
Yes, the challenge of understanding the when was I think, because I come from improv, the concept of both and of the situation. I don't necessarily need to know the person's name and the intimate details of that human that's handing me the coffee through the the Starbucks window, but still to respect them and to show them dignity by maybe even tipping them. That's the concept. So I guess there was a timing thing in here, not an either or, but like the concept of, in the heat of battle, the person in charge says, you do your job. We don't have a time to have a conversation about it or a discussion about it. You've done the training in the battle point. So that's where I guess the transaction of getting something done together versus the relational. So this is a deeper, longer conversation that I'm sure we're picking this apart, but in connecting humans to do a thing together in this networking is what I'm trying to ask the question.
Alex?
I think that part of it is also understanding where you are in the food chain, in that relationship. Sometimes people are at the same place, some people above, some people, behind you, in those areas. And the reason that's important is that when someone is way above you in the food chain and they're talking to you, keep it minimal. You're not going to tell them jokes, like there was I remember working on a show, and someone just an operator decided to tell someone that was standing next to them a joke. The joke was a little off color, and the person that they were telling the joke to ran the entire conference. And I had that job the next year. So anyway, so it was, but there's certain things like what I will say is the most dangerous thing in networking is humor. You just have to be humor is a very complicated thing, and it requires a lot of timing and everything else, and just be careful. And also just being oversharing, is something that's there, learning about other people. Now, people that are in the food chain are working for you or working for people that are there. When you can step out and be exceptional with them, you don't know when the next time they're going to be your peer or ahead of you or behind you or some other company. There's a lot of people that I've helped that were interns. They weren't interns forever, and I didn't know anything about it. I just treat, it's just the way, but treating everyone around you really well in an event is really important. So,
Chris?
but be careful of oversharing. That's all.
Chris?
I think it's important, like Alex said, about knowing where you are in the food chain. It's important to remember that just because you happen to cross paths with somebody because of a professional arrangement, like I'm going to put a mic on you, sir, I'm going to initiate your recording, sir, doesn't mean we're going to be friends. And I think that a lot of people look at these sort of happenstance path crossings as, oh, look, I'm now friends with. No, you're not. This person doesn't even know who you are. You're just the guy who put a mic on his tie. So don't act like you're his friend. Be polite, be courteous, be professional, get in, get out, get done. But don't get chummy. It's super awkward. It's super ridiculously awkward.
And then even people at that phase, they are looking for professionalism around them. So just by extending that courtesy could go a long way for yourself, because if you get hired back as the mic putter on person,
Yeah,
that it just, they remember you.
I think
time.
one of the nicest compliments I ever got was I can't even remember who it was now, but there was some exec, and I worked with them a few times. And I walked in the room once and they said, "Oh, hi, Chris." I was like, "Oh, you actually know who I am. Thank you."
Right. Alex?
yeah, something came up with in that discussion is if just the one thing you're tempted to do if you're working with someone that's a VIP is that you've had ideas of what they should do with their company or what they should do with their career, and this is your moment to tell them it's not your moment to tell them. It's like it's quite possibly the worst time to say that. And we've had that where we've had people that like they have to tell this person something. We're like, you don't have to, like, and we'll kindly move them away from that person, but we're like, oh, we call that going rogue, and but really respecting. I think that the last thing I'll say about this from a relation is really respecting the people and the space that you're in. We had a situation where we were in the White House and they said, this is the best team. Your team is the best team that's worked here in 29 years. I was like, who was there 29 years ago? And they were like, that's as long as I've been working here. so anyway, what we did wasn't that we were better technically. We all wore suits. We all asked them about carpet squares. We all made sure we didn't touch the walls. And to us that seemed obvious, but evidently not. And so respecting the space, remember you're building a network with everyone, including the people who are just helping you in the space, because they can open up all kinds of doors and make a lot of things easier if you just, keep your, good ball handling, when you're working in those spaces.
Literally open doors for you. Like be friends with the custodial team.
Yeah.
Like don't ignore.
Lots of things get done with the custodial team.
Right.
So yeah.
Nigel?
Yeah, that just prompted a thought for me about when I first came to live in America. I was working for IBM and I was a very junior person, and I was lucky enough to deal with some very senior people at IBM, which were godlike characters. And it took me about 6 months to work out that knowing the right answer was not a useful thing to have. Being responsive was the useful thing. And because if I knew the answer, it can't have been that good a question. But if I could go away and say, hey, let me do some work on that and come back with an answer, then they'd go, well, he's really responsive. He really values. And so sometimes knowing the right answer is not as useful as showing you'll do the work.
Chris?
Very briefly, a very old story, but Alex, you mentioned, I'm going to tell you how to run your company because I got to cross paths with you. I know a guy who was charged with walking Bill Gates from point A to point B at the Moscone Center this is a long time ago. And the guy,
Moscone, for those of you listening, is a really big place.
Really
walking
big
with them,
place, yeah.
you can walk for a while before you.
Yeah, so you had to have, if you weren't local, you had to have an escort. Anyway, and he turns to him and he goes, hey, so I'm trying to write a script in Word and and it keeps getting out of sync, because we have 2 columns. And Bill turns to him and he goes, well, you should use tables. And like nobody at that time was actually using tables. And he went, oh, that's a great idea.
Good one. Next question.
Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana is up next. He says, what are some of the networking organizations that the panelists belong to? Rotary, Toastmasters, something else?
Courtney?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a member of SMPTE, Society of Motion Picture and Television Engineers. And that's we have a Hollywood section. They have sections all over the United States and all over the world. So seek out your specific section. We used to have monthly meetings in person before COVID, but now they've gone virtual. And so I can plug this week's, it's this week, the meeting's topic is machine learning and visual effects. It's open to all people, members and non-members can attend. It's it's Wednesday at noon, and I'll post a link to that in the chat. I'm also another good place to go find people to meet up or organizations is meetup.org. If you've never seen this website, they arrange meetups in your local area on almost any type of subject. So you find a group, you find an event, and you go and meet up in person. Now during COVID, of course, that may not be happening right now, but after we're out of this situation, I think that's another good place to network with people. There's things for voiceover artists and just almost any kind of thing you would be interested in. You'll find like-minded people in those meetups, and they schedule meetings, once a month or so.
Yeah, a lot of them do. Well, the ones that I've been a part of also have transitioned to do some virtual ones, but yeah, definitely looking forward to the in-person. John?
When I first started my company out of college in my 20s, I joined all those things that I could for networking to build my business. So I was part of BNI, and Toastmasters, and they were helpful in finding new clients. What's interesting is my brother is the district governor for Rotary, Chris, and we were on Saturday, and he came in, and everybody was helping him because he has an event this coming weekend on Saturday, and so they were setting this camera up and getting him all set up for his big show this weekend. It was great.
Stefan?
Yeah, I joined Junior Chamber International in about 1998. It was a good organization for being in an age between 20 and 30, up to 40, and I joined Rotary about the same age. So I was about 30 that age, and both organizations were very, very helpful with building up connections, but not necessarily connections to make business out of, but to have somebody to ask for whatever problem you have. They're super, super useful. And as it turned out, I kind of like to work at organizations and not so much in organizations. And this was a learning of all that time.
Alex?
Yeah. I mean, the organization I spend the most time working with is office hours. It's a pretty good place to meet people, But I say that in a way that there's a lot of people here that are listening that may or may not go into after hours, and it's an incredible resource, of meeting people and learning from them and everything else. But the different things that are there are really, really useful. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later. But the other things that the other two big things, other than just my personal network, are most likely Twitter and LinkedIn. Are my two other things that I kind of have a relationship with a lot of people, and a lot of people that have met me somewhere, and we trade tweets back and forth, or even direct messages. And so those are other useful ones from my perspective. I don't spend a lot of time as like Courtney. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook.
For myself, I've been intentional in having like professional ones for my development. So that's and personal. So like the Junior League of Atlanta, I run a business. So the Chamber of Commerce, being a part of those communities, I find very helpful, being part of the office hours community. And then also from a technical side, like XR Atlanta, that's where Elizabeth Strickler, we're both members, and just having access to different people. So I look at that as like, okay, so my personal side, my special interests, and business development. So that's kind of how I've placed them all together. Next question.
Next one comes from Douglas Carmichael, and he says, for those on the autism spectrum, it can be difficult knowing what level of interaction is appropriate at a specific time. What guidance would be useful for people like us?
Jason?
All right. You learn a lot of weird stuff on the way to a psych degree, and I was reminded when I read this question about the way that it was explained and defined to me in college, which is that autism is social deafness. I don't particularly like that, although it seems to be clinically accurate. My advice is that what you should do is see the ASD and the anxiety surrounding this concern that as two separate things, and pay very careful attention to whether or not the various social interactions and your anxiety about them is what's getting in your way, or whether it's strictly the ASD. Also, if you end up with various social situations and you have friends that are in a similar situation, use your technical ability, take notes or make a mental note and say to yourself, pull this person aside afterwards and be like, was that appropriate? Did that work correctly? Was that weird? I'm sure they'll answer you.
Tony?
I agree with everything that Jason just said. The thing that I would point out for the person that's on the spectrum is that you need to be mindful that socialization is your biggest issue. And you need to do the check-ins with the people, but also you need to be mindful of mindfulness. You need to breathe. You need to take your time. You need to try to exercise patience when it seems as if what you're speaking to is not being addressed. Take a time out. Come back to it later. ask the person, did you understand what I was trying to get to? It's not a thing where you are going to be able to get all of it. And one of the issues that people on the spectrum have is they want an immediate answer to the specific thing that they are dealing with at that moment. And you have to understand that that is not necessarily the way that most people operate. So that if you don't get the answer that you need, or you don't get the perspective shared with you in the way in which you want, it's okay to try to circle back to it later with that individual or with others.
Alex?
I was often known as pretty expressive when I was younger, and I'm still pretty expressive. I still have my issues of oversharing here and there. But the one thing I learned is that when in doubt, I'd keep my mouth shut. It's like if I'm in a meeting and I don't know if this is the right time or whatever, I generally won't say it. And I'll, if I'm unsure about whether this is the, and that took me decades to get good at, and I still screwed up. So I'll still blurt something out here and there, but for the most part, I learned over time to just very much slow down my communication in a sense that I don't know if this is it, if this is the place to do it or not. And so I often pay a lot of attention to who's talking to who and who should I include. And it's a very subtle thing, but when in doubt, I tend to stop rather than start. And I found that to be useful over time.
Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada says, what role do social networks like LinkedIn and office hours play in building your network?
Sky?
I used the term Rolodex earlier, and for those that aren't familiar with that, it was physically a place to keep business cards and or write down people's names. And then, of course, the digital version of that has become a contact list or some kind of address book that's now being stored in some kind of machine or some digital area. But they're very purposeful and I immediately thought could have helped Chris find his camera person in Hawaii, because it's like, oh, Hawaii camera people, and at least you would have narrowed down in trying to help him remember. So I'm using these digital versions all the time, and I guess I didn't think of office hours as a social network, because Facebook is referred to as a platform oftentimes. So I'll have to ponder on that one a little bit.
Alex?
Yeah, I definitely look at these in different levels. My professional network is really around LinkedIn, and I've been using it since almost day one. And so I don't really do anything other than I just post things every once in a while, but very rarely. If I want it to be something that's useful, I don't post a lot of people on LinkedIn tend to overshare, and I tend not to. Maybe that's successful for them. I don't know. But I use LinkedIn in that kind of more serious way. And then Twitter is my less serious kind of just having fun, and whoever follows me, follows me. But I also, the one thing that I will say is that in all of these areas, I tend to be, unless it's really in the middle of my industry, I do not talk about politics on social media. I just don't. Religion and politics, just like here, I don't interact with that. I used to, and it was not a good idea. So anyway, so I think that that's the only thing I would say as far as the role. But the role is generally, again, it comes back to the same thing that I talked about before, which is serving your market. So I'm putting up things that I think that people who are following me might be interested in, or at least entertained, by. And so those are the things that are there. I have an Instagram account that I post. I haven't posted in for a long time. I occasionally show up at Facebook to check my messages, and then but the two big ones for me are Twitter and LinkedIn, and they have two very different roles. I don't cross post things. I post things where I think that they're appropriate for that audience.
Tony?
So for me, Facebook is a way to interact with those people that I may have connected with in college, high school, family, friends. That's what Facebook is for me. YouTube is a tool for me for engagement and conversation with Tony Mobley, but also if I want to try to learn something that I may need some additional support from, in terms of I didn't get quite all of it in office hours, or I need to reinforce what I had an opportunity to learn. YouTube is for that. The others, I really have not really embraced. I'm looking forward to embracing LinkedIn in a way that I haven't done before. I'm looking to be able to actually do live streaming on LinkedIn. That's one of my goals for this year, to get quite good at it. That's kind of where I am with social media.
And you mean outside of conversations with Tony Mobley, or you mean getting that live on LinkedIn? Sorry, just
I had not really thought about conversations being on LinkedIn other than it being more of a promotional of coming guests on conversations. But I want to do something video-wise on LinkedIn that may be separate from conversations altogether.
okay. Sorry, I just jumped that because my brain started brainstorming for you. For growing and building a professional network, yes, I use LinkedIn, much like Tony and Alex have said. Like Facebook is kind of like people I grew up with, family, friends. There are occasional folks that I interact with a lot, but LinkedIn being the primary one, because that's where I'll share tips and advice, and also getting into, much like many of you who are watching who are possibly in Mukana, just the interaction that happens with people in the comments. Like, so often that is overlooked as a valuable way to meet and build relationships. So likewise, I've had LinkedIn Live for a while. So whether that's interacting with people who are watching our live broadcast or people that I know participating in their shows. So I just find that being a great way, because after a few interactions, then, people send out, and vice versa, send out requests to connect from that perspective. So I find that very well. And then also just throwing it out there, like Twitter now has Twitter Spaces, and I've participated in a number of them. And I also see like communities building around spaces, which is much like Clubhouse as well. And just depending what kind of conversations you jump into, that I find when I'm on stage, that then all of a sudden there are more followers, or when I'm in a space listening to someone, connecting to people there. And I think your DMs, for those who have DMs open, like you can actually reach out and touch certain people. So just throwing that out as a tip. And Bill.
For me, I came up in the era where most online communication was written. We didn't have any of the video or even podcasting and the rest of that. So I started in many years ago trying to increase my writing skills to the point where I thought I could really do a decent job. Eventually, that led me to send in a demo article to one of the trade magazines. It sat there for a year and did nothing, but then one day out of the blue, I got a call, and I ended up, because of that, writing a column for the magazine for 10 years. And that made me comfortable writing. It made me comfortable being able to react to certain things, take a position, and defend that position if I felt it was honest. Then I started doing that on social media, particularly in Creative Cow in the early days. That was one of the boards that I was in. And I always thought it was just something where I was trying to continue my writing skills and understand how to polish them, understand how to craft arguments and do them. But I was shocked when later on I got into some professional circumstances where I was in a group of people that I thought nobody had a clue who I was, but people high up in organizations had been reading what I'd been writing on those social media groups, and they actually knew who I was and had questions for me, and it shocked me. And I was able to form relationships because of what I had been putting out in written form for all those years. And because I do have a history in radio, I'd say my entry into office hours and being able to do this is in part because I spent time in radio doing that same thing, having to open up a microphone and create content. We didn't think about it as that. We just thought this is going to be the same thing I do with reading commercial copy or something like that. But now I don't have copy. I have to learn to extemporaneously form sentences that make sense, argue points and things like that. All of that has gone into helping me navigate this world where all that you have is your reputation, and your reputation is formed by how people perceive you in written word, on camera, through spoken word or whatever. I mean, all you have as an asset really at the heart of this is yourself. So whatever time you can spend learning those things along the way to help you project who you are, that's probably the most valuable promotion that you have.
Stefan?
In my case, all these social networks are more or less a mirror of my real life connections. So it's very, very rare that I meet or met somebody in a social network, and after that we meet in real life. But it's always the other way around. So it's more or less a mirror of my real life address book, my contacts in LinkedIn and wherever else.
Alex?
I will say the one thing as you're interacting with these social networks is to really try to keep the as much of it be protein as possible. And what I mean by that is marketing posts should be very few and far between. I try to do as little marketing as possible over my social networks. I share things that I think the people who are following me or people I'm connected to would find interesting. But I'm very careful to, other than, we're doing something. And even when I post something from office hours, which I don't do every day, maybe once a month, I post it because I think that people will want to see it. Not because I'm trying to promote it. Oh, my Twitter following may find this interesting, so I'm going to put it up there. But I don't put all of them up there, and I don't do them to push it. I mostly feel like, they would feel left out. But that's where I go with that kind of thing. Putting lots of marketing things in your Twitter or especially your LinkedIn feed. And we've talked about this in the past. I'm particularly sensitive to. It was such an honor to work with the blah 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 in LinkedIn, because I just go, it's like a humble brag, and I just go, okay. So that's how I don't know if everyone reads it that way, but that's how I read it. And so I don't usually put those up. So anyway, but just to be careful about those, and not doing, you can do those if if that's part of your net marketing, but just be careful to do them few and far between, and fill the rest of the time with lots of useful things that people that are connected to you are just purely, there's no direct connection to anything. You're just putting something out there that's useful, that's readable for them.
Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada is up next. He says, share a valuable relationship you've built in your industry and what makes it successful.
Alex?
I probably have maybe 10 or 15 relationships that I'm not going to mention any of them specifically, but what makes them all successful is that we're just friends. Like we won't talk to each other for months, and then suddenly we're back and forth for a couple of days over some idea, and then it goes away. When we're in the same vicinity, we have lunch. Those are, and they have been integral to everything that I've done. But it's probably a small handful of people. I definitely don't try to do it with everyone.
Sky?
I was challenged with that, Alex. You're exactly right. I was thinking, if I say that person, then it sounds like I'm bragging. If I say those person, then I'm going to leave somebody out. So I'm kind of going to go with the global concept of office hours as a community is a success for me. And because we're using technology, but we're supporting one another. We're making positive change. So that's the success of a nutrient-rich environment in this industry of AV and communications. That's my success.
Tony?
Yeah, I have to piggyback on what Scott just said, that office hours community is in part the community that has fostered so much of what I'm currently doing. And the interesting thing is that I am constantly asking myself or being pushed to stretch and grow and learn more and be more, I'm being more energized to learn more things and to try things and to risk and challenge myself. And it's just been, a powerful experience, and I'm probably not articulating it the way in which I mean, but it has made a tremendous difference in my life, in terms of the things that I'm trying to do professionally as a person who's trying to get into video production and a person who's trying to do some things with small community of people who are trying to grow and stretch as well.
Okay. Nigel?
Yeah, I've had a number of mentors in my career who've really made my career possible. And so I've tried to return the gesture by mentoring other people. And I will tell you that three or four of the people that I've mentored now mentor me back again. And those are the most important relationships I have.
I'm right there with you, Nigel. That's what I was going to jump in and say. The most valuable relationships have been mentors. And that came from first an attitude of service and just showing up and helping. And them, and I think Alex has said this in the past, and many people have said this in the past of, you know, when you see someone showing up, you especially for a doer, your attention's like, what are they about? And wanting to find out more. So that, and then now being in that position to be able to help others, like mentorship, by far the most important relationship. Next question.
Next question comes to us from Kristen Osterkamp in Germany, or Kirsten, I'm sorry. How does your office hours experience influence the way that you approach other business networking actions?
Good question. Courtney.
Well, one thing it did is it forced me to upgrade my camera and my lighting and my sound so that now when I go to attend virtual union meetings and so on, I'm usually voted the guy with the best camera and best sound amongst all the professionals that I deal with. So it has upped my profile on all these virtual meetings that we're all going to, thanks to office hours.
Street cred by Courtney.
Right. Alex?
I think that for a lot of us, especially those of those of us on the panel, I think we banter better in meetings, you know, than most people because we do this every day. You know, like we're going back and forth and we have to think on our feet. And I think that it's just the practice of it definitely affects my other meetings. As far as how I approach other networking, I'm not really doing any other networking. I think that as office hours grew, I've kind of like, this is the group that I hang out with, you know, and I don't really, I don't have a lot of other outlets anymore, just because it's been the most, the most fulfilling for me as far as the group of people.
Chris?
I was going to say along those lines, Alex, the thing that I keep coming back to is time, like how much time we spend together versus how much time I spend with other people. And I wish that I could get them to better embrace the idea of let's just spend some more time together. But then I come back to I get angry when I talk to this person on Zoom too long because it's so awkwardly bad. I mean, we talk about it a lot here, but it makes such a difference. It's such a difference, and it's so, I wish I had a better way of saying it, but it makes a huge difference when somebody is easy to talk to, primarily for a lot of the technical reasons.
Alex?
Yeah, you know, and I think that at this point, I spend more time with folks in office hours than anyone other than my nuclear family. You know, like
Same.
it's you know, like but I think that time, to your point, is easier because we're pretty well equipped, and not everybody in after hours, but it still works. You know, people are sensitive to it at least, but I think that just having, you know, it's always the place that I just kind of go. You know, like, oh, I'm going to go listen for a little while and see what people are talking about. And I just haven't found another network that was quite like that.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, Meta, the Facebook, mentions that in-person events will be crucial to building communities, especially in the hybrid model. Wouldn't in-person events still exclude 99% of your addressable market, even if only internally?
Nigel?
Yeah, so last week, I had 65 of my closest friends from work in a room, as dangerous as that may sound to lots of people, because those are the 65 people who are our sales team. And in that case, that was fundamentally bar one, who couldn't make it 100% of the market. And that was the right tool for that specific action. And my only advice here is not every type of communication requires the same set of tools. And sometimes it may require face-to-face, and sometimes it may require virtual. I was also with a bunch of our suppliers, and we actually all had a conversation about rather than going to big trade shows, is there a better way of doing it? But sometimes you need the physical people in front of you, either because you need them to be there or that you are more effective when they are.
Alex.
Facebook's been doing hybrids for a long time. I mean, they have they do, town halls pretty often internally, and they've done some externally as well. I think that there is a reality to it's very important for the CEO or leadership to get up and talk to the employees, and sometimes that means that there's some of them are going to be in the room and some of them are going to be online. I do still think that if you did it all virtual, it would be better than if you do it hybrid, because the folks that are subtly getting it are getting it somewhere. But I do think that in person absolutely makes sense and I would say sub 300, like up to 300 people. There's a reason to do that. Over 300, I don't think anyone's really getting a specialized experience at that point. So, but again, there's exceptions, sports, and there's other things like that are exceptions to this rule. But I think that it becomes much more difficult to give people a personalized experience in a hybrid event than in a physical or in a digital.
Question. Oh,
Next
no,
question.
sorry,
Oh.
Chris. Sorry, Chris.
I would love to have somebody, at the, collegiate sociological level do a study where you invited people into a Zoom call, just call it a Zoom call, like, hey, we want to discuss some ambiguous thing, whatever, it doesn't matter what you're talking about, and have like 8 people in the room that look like we do, and then invite a person who just flipped open the laptop and see how quickly they react to conform because they feel out of place. Now, granted, they're not going to be like running off to Amazon in the middle of this call, but like, will they adjust their headroom? Will they put their computer up on a box? Will they try to frame themselves a little better? And then do the same thing where you put one person who looks remarkably better and put them in a group of nonconformists, if you will. I think it'd be a super interesting study where you could pull metrics on how, and maybe you ask them later, how did you feel in that meeting? I felt really awkward. I felt like I should have worn a better shirt, whatever. But I think it would be fascinating to pull that data. And I'm sorry, it didn't really match Douglas's question, but it felt like it was my turn to talk.
Fascinating nonetheless. Next question.
Next question comes from Sky Gleason in Seattle, and he says catchphrases in terms of connecting people change, but the term tribe has come back into vogue. How is office hours a tribe in the networking of people question?
The way I look at it, or why I feel like at home, that's kind of what I think of when you think about your tribe, your people, is, office hours is, and Alex read this New Year's Eve day as the clock was going off, the weird and the creatives and the outliers kind of. So office hours is like that place where you have super tech people, and then you've got people who champion accessibility, and you've got the marketing and the business, and you can find, as someone who's a multi-hyphenate, you find a little bit of everyone there. So I can be more of myself because there's just so much diversity in skill. So Bill.
I like all of those things, and I love office hours. I'm coming here, but I do think there is an essential difference, and that is with a tribe, there is a shared destiny. The tribe finds food, or the tribe does not find food. The individual members do not sink or swim as much on their own efforts as on the efforts of the tribe. So I don't know whether it's Chris or Nigel or whomever, my success or failure at doing my role here doesn't really determine their outcome on their path. And in that one area, it doesn't seem to me that kind of tribe. Now, who knows what the future will bring? And maybe as we get these structures that Alex is working so hard to build in place, maybe there will be deeper tribal aspects of we're all working on the same types of programs. And then it could be that the success or failure of the overall determines something about the success or failure of the individuals. But I think right now that's one of the differences.
Alex?
I would actually say that's probably an argument of how we're becoming a tribe, because we're, more and more of our time is spent talking to, to interacting with each other, hiring each other, working with each other. Those are all things that we are becoming more entwined in that area. And I think most tribes started out with a bunch of individuals that started working, like, hey, what do we camp in the same place, but still hunt on our own or do whatever. And it slowly became something else. And so what I will say is that I think that online, quote unquote, tribes are going to become bigger and bigger and bigger, because we can now associate with the people that we choose, unconstrained by geographic, location, and that means that lots of people can figure out who they want to interact with, and they can largely spend their time interacting with the people that they choose to, not the people that just happen to be geographically close to them. And I think that we're going to see more and more of that. I think that eventually, not now, but a decade from now, those people will start to reorganize where they live to be around each other again. So the thing is that what will become large tribes in the cloud, so to speak, will then return to people wanting to build a new city or build something else where there's lots of them that are in one place, or they'll choose to, hey, let's some of us move. And it won't, I don't think it'll be like all of us move in one day, but like there's like 10 people there. And someone goes, well, the next, then people start buying their houses or getting something else because there's some job there or there's something. And that's how we've organized around companies. But we may find ourselves organizing around interests, and those would be, or around commonality. And I think that could happen over, again, decades. But I think that it potentially could really reform a lot of things really interestingly.
And Sky?
Well, as the survival of a species, I celebrate liberty that you have given me a new term. I'm going to make a t-shirt. I am now a multi-hyphenate, because I'm tired of being locked into you are this or that or this or that. I'm multiple of these things, and I'm skilled in certain areas. And so how do I bring these skills and to Bill's point, for the survival of the entire community? So that's why I love this community. This is great.
Stefan?
So for me, the term tribe says much about my feeling towards the tribe, not so much about the tribe's feeling towards me.
That's a good way to put that. Jason?
It's easy to forget when we answer these questions over and over again, at least on the panel, that there is tremendous value to getting better at answering the same questions, to getting the difference between being impossible to misunderstand and to be understandable. You can drive a bus between those differences. And the real kind of tribal kind of feeling of unity that I get with office hours is that I personally have figured out that the gestalt of all of us ends up rising all boats, so to speak.
And Courtney?
And I'm mystified how the word tribe could come back into vogue in this politically correct world, because there's whole websites on why you might want to rethink using the word tribe for your business community. So, it gives you all these racially insensitive, it's overused, cliche, jargony. So maybe we got to look for a new word.
Can you drop that in Makana, please?
Sure.
I want to take a look at that. All right. Well, we've come to the end of another fantastic show. Thank you so much for joining us. Alex, I will hand it back to you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks to the producers for all the fine comments and questions, keeping everything rolling forward. And thank you, of course, to the panelists. This doesn't happen without you, and we really appreciate it. So we'll now jump into After Hours, and we'll see you there.